It was on Twitter one Thursday evening that I saw the good news. The over 65 cohort, even the vocabulary of the pandemic is ugly, could book their first vaccination slots. Military scramble ensued as all we old dears pulled up the relevant website, filled in our details, assured that we weren't a robot by peering at squares to identify those with crosswalks or some other Americanized term, and awaited our notification codes, which didn't work because of the volume of online traffic. We may have celebrated too many birthdays, but don't get in our way when our elbows are out, online or otherwise. Texts were flying between households. Have you seen this? Have you got your appointment yet? It took until the next morning for the website to recover itself from the onslaught of gerontology, and appointments were made for me and my husband for the next day. We were unused to such speed of organisation since this trouble started. So happy were we made a family day out of it to Derry, an hour up the road and the furthest we travelled for a while. The adult children, still here since before Christmas and working from home, came too, and we piled the dogs into the car as well for a post-vaccine walk in St Colum's Park. The big finale would be a delicious takeaway from Pike and Palms, the great food stall by the River Foyle for the best burgers, fries, tacos. It's high on the family list of the most coveted meals we can't reach because of lockdown, a list we sometimes recite at the table after dinner like a reverse grace, eyes raised to the distance. The adrenaline was high. It was a grand day out for masks, confirmation of identities, hearts in mouth in case we weren't on the list after all, and the joy of seeing Derry folk as a change from Achadui ones as we strode through the park. The dogs weren't the only ones wagging their tails. We returned home exhausted, but feeling that maybe there was a chink of light at the end of the COVID tunnel, that maybe there'd be more days out in the months ahead. I was full of aches and pains, whether from the vaccination or the online yoga class I'd done in the morning, followed by the cold dog walk and the longest drive I'd done in a while. I neither knew nor cared. A pot of tea and a few glasses of wine, a film to watch. There was no stopping me. The next morning, I was still a bit tired, but nothing extreme. I was soon cleaning windows and hoovering with renewed vigour. Since early on in the pandemic, I've reported daily to an app set up by King's College in London, telling scientists there of any possible symptoms which might be COVID related, and if they ask me to, I go for a COVID test. I've only had to do it a couple of times, and again, they asked me to have a test the next day when I reported these aches and pains, though I knew they might well be vaccine related. By Tuesday, the result came in, negative. There's another research project our family recently joined after being randomly chosen, this one by Oxford University with the Office for National Statistics. Its aim is to assess how widespread COVID continues to be in the community, and in particular, how many people might be asymptomatic, displaying no symptoms but testing positive. We take weekly tests for the first month, then monthly for a year if we wish, and this one even gives us payment. Apart from that, it seemed like a useful thing to do, and like the good members of society we are, we signed up for it. So on Thursday of that week, a woman arrived at our house with swabs for self-testing for the second week. We all tested ourselves, answered some survey questions, and gave her back the swabs for the laboratory. I had wondered if my husband and I would still be required to continue, as we'd been partly vaccinated, but we were. So it came as something of a shock to receive a phone call on Sunday morning, 8 days after the wonderful vaccination, to be told I had tested positive for COVID. I had no symptoms, apart from a pounding, racing heart at this news. The thing that's been haunting us for a year, and which we rehearse mentally arrives. Rehearsal was a waste of time. Deep breaths. No one else in the house had tested positive, but we all had to isolate according to the rules. I felt unclean, looked around me at every surface, handle, kitchen implements, chair I had touched in the hour since I got out of bed. Walked heavy steps upstairs to break the bad news. More deep breaths. We decided I should isolate more deeply in the hope that the rest of the family might escape the virus. It seemed unlikely, as my daughter and I had done the sweaty Saturday morning online yoga class again. My husband and I had slept in the same bed, and my son and I had sat next to each other on the sofa the previous day watching rugby. But it was worth a try. I grabbed a bag, stuffed in clothes and necessities, and banished myself to the spare room, which has its own bathroom. I managed to negotiate the adjoining sitting room with the nice wood burner and TV. And here I've been since Sunday and will remain until Monday morning. I'm calling it the West Wing. An arrangement to see a friend who wanted our opinion and advice had to be cancelled. A legal document we need to have witnessed has to wait. My weekly appointment at a small local zero waste shop is cancelled. The dog food is running out, so a kind friend bought a bag and delivered it, keeping her distance from the plague house, of course. Meals are delivered on a tray outside whichever of the two rooms I'm occupying, and the staff are worried that I'm getting too used to this. Speaking as the usual main cook and cleaner, it's a nice wee change for me, although I'm dreading the state of the rest of the house if and when normality returns. A Chinese New Year banquet had been ordered from a local chef for Friday, which also happens to be the day before our wedding anniversary, which is the day before Valentine's Day. And that has had to be cancelled with an administration fee of £20, I might add. We had chosen Friday the 13th to get married 18 years ago because it was available as a date and no one else wanted it out of superstition. It was all organised in a bit of a hurry, not for the usual old-fashioned reason, but rather because my husband, a civil servant at the time, was travelling to some dodgy countries, and if he got killed, the government would have given me and our children much less compensation if we weren't married. So very romantic. We took the 5-year-old twins to London for our wedding because in Northern Ireland in that distant past, the local register office, our only venue option apart from church, which we don't attend, was a hotbed of sectarian argument, and we didn't want to think about that. Also, it had an ugly swirly patterned carpet. There were tears on the big day, not from us, the level-headed, happy couple, but the twins, who were wary of the unfamiliar and anyway wanted to go to the Natural History Museum and the Transport Museum, little nerds. I was close to tears myself, and what they try to tell you is the happiest day of your life, what with the effort of getting them into smart clothes and persuading them we wouldn't be long. They cheered up a bit when a witness friend's wife presented them with Polaroid cameras to record the so-called happy day. The other witness got delayed on the train up from Sussex, leaves on a line or some such, another possible crisis, but she arrived at the last minute. The bureaucracy took forever, as the registrar seemed convinced it was a marriage of convenience. It was, in a way, but the twins were well brought up and didn't squirm too much. And after a wonderful Italian lunch, we finally got to the Transport Museum. What a place to spend your honeymoon. There's been good health and only occasional sickness since then. And although I apparently have COVID now, there are no symptoms or side effects so far. Maybe it's a false positive result, or maybe I'm one of the lucky people who experience no obvious symptoms, but we're taking no risks. I've even been out in the garden in the Baltic cold, tidying. I'm hoping for a negative test result for all of us this week in our COVID trial, and especially hoping we don't all have received positive tests at various points, requiring us all to isolate again. We might not be allowed out for weeks at this rate. 4 adults from one family stuck in the house for weeks. It could become a murder scene. But we know we're fortunate to live in a spacious house in an isolated spot with plenty of garden. The inconveniences are petty matters. We have all girded ourselves with as much mental strength as we can muster. I have blocked the negative fears which sometimes creep in, the reports of people who didn't feel too bad for the first week or two, then deteriorated. Staying indoors doesn't feel healthy and adds to the feeling of stuffiness and paranoia of whether I'm really breathing properly. So I'm going outside when I can keep warm enough. I take comfort from a doctor telling me a couple of years ago I had strong lungs. I think about those who have suffered and those who are still suffering far more than me. And I also try not to think too much for my own selfish sanity. I'm still here, and so is my family, in sickness and in health.